Welcome back, fellow dandelions. I'm Ande Anderson. Thank you so much for being here with us on this journey to overcoming toxic relationships. At the beginning of our videos together, I often like to give you insights into the meaning of the dandelion. So do you know that the dandelion is associated with hopes and dreams that come true? When you were a kid, or maybe even when you're an adult, did you ever blow on that dandelion fluff and make a wish and then watch it scatter in the wind? This is something that I just want you to think about a little bit to get today as we go into this masterclass. What are your hopes? What are your dreams? Don't forget about them. This is so important. So many of us who have had traumatic upbringings or perhaps toxic relationships have given up on our dreams. We've given up on our hopes, and we've been living just in this survival mode where we're not really thinking ahead to the future and, dreaming up all these amazing possibilities for our lives. So today I encourage you to spend some time pondering. What are your dreams? What are your hopes? Because you are so worth it, and it's so important to not forget about what you're here to do in the world, what you're here to experience, what you're here to give to the world. What are your hopes and what are your dreams? We have another great masterclass lined up for you today with Jerry Wise, who is here to talk with you about overcoming narcissistic relationships with self-differentiation. We dive into how to heal from narcissistic abuse, why it might be so hard to leave a relationship even when you know it's not right for you. We talk about toxic shame, abandonment wounds, growing up with narcissistic parents, and so much more. So please enjoy this latest masterclass, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AVAIYA University and our Dandelion community. I am Ande Anderson. My partner, ALLEN and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for being here. Today, our fellow teacher, Jerry Wise, is here to talk with us today about overcoming narcissistic abuse. For 40 plus years, Jerry has been a professional in psychotherapy, family therapy, and now he is an international life coach. He specializes in coaching self-differentiation, which we'll talk about today. He has been a professional musician, a pastor, therapist, consultant for family businesses, and family systems expert. In addition to being a popular speaker, Jerry has also been a featured speaker on several AVAIYA University events over the years. So welcome back, Jerry.
Hey, Ande, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's always great to see you. I love our conversations, and
I do enjoy them.
So glad you said yes to this. Obviously, there are a lot of people out there struggling in relationships, and particularly in narcissistic relationships. So I'd love it if you just start us off by sharing a little bit about suggestions around people who may have come out of a relationship with someone who is narcissistic and they are in the healing process. They have experienced trauma. They've been through a lot. Any suggestions for them on how to heal?
There are lots of things that people can do. And I think one of the most important things is remembering that the healing is a process of going through phases. So it's not just you come out and you should be all well and everything should go fine. No, we're recovering from trauma, from being in a relationship where we had no self, where we were partaking of the self of the narcissist. And so we haven't found ourselves. We've also done many things that in the light of day, much like an alcoholic or addict would regret, the things they did while they were addicted. Well, the things we do and did while we were with a narcissist, we could regret. And so there's grief work early on, and just and also some self-beratement, which we want to avoid, berating ourselves about how stupid we were for being in a relationship with a narcissist. I know I have, and gone through those phases. And that early part is beginning to recognize what we've gone through. We kind of hit bottom, or we crashed, or we had that experience of the fracture and the crashing that we have when we start to come out of a narcissistic relationship, and once we become more aware. And then that awareness builds into how I have lost myself or did not have myself from growing up in childhood, and going through the phases of growing yourself up, because that's really what we're doing. And everybody has to grow themselves up. Those of us who have been in narcissistic relationships have to do that too. and moving then into beyond grieving and starting to look at loving yourself, to empowerment, or an empowerment phase, a self-awareness phase, and then a transformation phase. How I'm changing my life, and then a self-differentiation phase, where we begin to zoom out and look at our relationships from a wider point of view, rather than just that narrow point of view of the narcissist and me. We start to look at our relationships in a much broader view and see it from the top of the stadium, rather than from down where the center is with the football, looking across to the blocker, or to the rusher. That we get up there and see what's going on in our lives. And I've seen people who've come out of narcissistic abuse go through those phases and successfully heal themselves. So I think looking at it as a phase and being very kind to yourself. I'll tell you, if there's anything somebody needs who is in a narcissistic abuse, an abusive narcissistic relationship, is self-care, self-patience, self-acceptance, self-love, because oftentimes that has not been our norm. Mm-hmm. And what's been our norm is that we should beat ourselves up, and that we deserve to be beaten up emotionally. And so we want to start with being really beginning to love ourselves. And that's not always easy, because we maybe weren't taught that when we were growing up. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how to love myself. I don't even know if I deserve I should love myself. I don't know if I want to love myself. I don't want to be in another narcissistic relationship, but I'm not sure I want to love me. And so that's a question early on that people can ask themselves and make a big change with that.
So given that, like, I'd love to talk a little bit about people not repeating the cycle, right? Not continuing to date maybe the same person over and over again, because I see that a lot in our community. A lot of people have mentioned that. So how do they, like, if they come out of a relationship and then eventually want to get back into a healthy romantic partnership, how do they do that without, picking that wrong person, or not maybe self-differentiating enough before they get into that relationship? Any suggestions on that kind of healthy transition?
And you're right. That's a common problem that people have, and they will repeat that many times. But narcissistic abuse folks are not the only ones who repeat those spousal problems. But certainly we can have those problems where we keep finding, there's a room full of people and I'll find the narcissist every time. And that's who I'll be attracted to, or they'll be attracted to me. I think for me, certainly becoming aware of narcissism, using our brains and using our thinking to see red flags. And sometimes we have to learn that by rote. I mean, just by memory. If somebody's this and doing this, that should be a red flag for you. Now, I'm still attracted to them, but I see that's a red flag. And, there are books on, how to avoid dangerous men, I think by Sandra Brown. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of red flags we can look at. But I don't think that's all we need, because, again, I think a narcissist can be love bombing and charming in the beginning, and so they hide those red flags until later, and then the red flags come out. So is there a way we can grow or heal so we don't get into more narcissistic relationships? And I believe that comes with, if you're coming out of a narcissistic relationship, certainly take the time to heal yourself first. You need to change first before the relationships are going to change. If you don't change, you're going to, even if you say, well, I won't be doing that again. If I find another guy or a woman who treats me like that, I won't like them, or I won't want to be in a relationship with them. But I think there's even a deeper healing where we become more a self, more aware of ourselves. We become more mature. And so our self-differentiation level goes up. And then we're not even somebody who would be attractive to a narcissist. We certainly wouldn't find an attraction to them, because we've matured, we've grown, we've healed, and in an irreversible way, a real way. And I think that's what self-differentiation is about. So that I don't just change my thinking without changing my emotional process. And that's why I like family systems, because it's a change of emotional process. That's going to get you into different relationships. I was just working with a client recently, and he's going, I can't believe the girls I don't find attractive anymore. Those would have been the ones I would have, and now I just don't even feel that pull to do that, because he's done a lot of work on himself. And it ends up being an organic not getting into a relationship, rather than just a checklist. Okay, well, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't be doing that, they should have empathy, because again, a narcissist can feign all of that. And then we will be, but if the emotional process is different, I think that's something the narcissist cannot fake. They can't, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but they can't connect with you because you truly are different on the inside. They just, and you don't connect with them. And that's, I don't know if that's helpful, but
it does. Yeah. There's just so much that it doesn't necessarily need to be right. So we can see it with our eye visibly, but right, there's a change or a shift inside of us, and that reflects the people that we attract into our life. So absolutely.
And a change in how our chemistry works. Because everybody talks about that chemistry. We just had that chemistry, and I'm going, then we need to change the chemicals, because we want a different chemistry. Well, that takes changing the emotional field that I'm connected to in my family of origin, and change that emotional field as I relate to other people. And if I can change how I function in that emotional field, it really changes the chemistry. That's the best way I can describe a complicated process.
Yeah. Well, I would love to ask you one of our member questions now, because it kind of ties into this, right? Especially for people who are getting into new relationships potentially, or obviously looking to do that in the future. So this person is asking, can you give us an overview of the kinds of manipulation techniques that narcissists use? It's really useful to know how to recognize them when they are very covert. So, right, times when it's not as obvious, but I guess maybe an overview of like what might be more obvious, and then some more covert kinds of techniques that to be aware of.
Well, and I think with a lot of narcissists, they will feign or pretend to be a different person to get into that relationship with you, love bombing, hiding their anger, hiding their disagreement, hiding their controllingness, so that it seems like I'm the right partner for you. And I can say loving things, or but actually inside, that's not the genuine them. Their emotional process is not healthy. They have a personality disorder. And while all of us can fall prey to some cluster B, sociopathic, narcissistic folks, they can be pretty amazing in their manipulation. But I think some of the things that I've shared with people that they may want to take a look at is, if you know what a narcissist does, then challenge those things or poke those things early in the relationship. Start by saying no early on and see what you get. Start by checking out how enmeshed do we become right off the bat. If you become too enmeshed right off the bat, or too fused, that's probably going to create a relationship problem down the road, narcissists or not. If you become too enmeshed, and you feel, oh, this is the person I don't have to have a self with. This is a person I don't, that they will complete me. All of those are myths. Nobody completes you. You complete you. It doesn't mean we don't love people and want them in our lives and we wouldn't trade them for anything in the world, but it takes two selves to have a relationship. So I think, can you say no? Can you see what they do in terms of their irritability or anger or moodiness and be aware of that? Starting to be yourself so that you can challenge their hidden parts of themselves. And narcissists will be charming. They can be very charming. And I think if someone is too charming, that raises a red flag for me. I'm sorry. It's just, if you're too charming, that should go ding, 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 rather than going, oh, this is so wonderful. That, oh, they love my mom and dad, and they just, we should, and convince them that we should be together. And like, well, wait a minute, they're not going to be living with him or her. You're going to be dating them, not them. And also looking at the tactics that will happen often with narcissists is, I would like to be the influence in your life, not your friends, not the pastor, not other people around, not, I don't like the therapist you're going to, I don't, they want to isolate you. So we don't want to isolate. We want to be very careful about that controlling, isolating part. Or being financially dependent. Somebody comes in as a narcissist, many times they're very successful and financially well off. They can be. And they'll just buy your love, and they can buy that. But there's a downside when that happens. And so we want to maintain ourselves and look for those kinds of traits. There are many more, not having empathy, but they have looked at other people and see how you're supposed to be empathetic.
Right.
And they will mirror that. But true empathy look for true empathy rather than just mirrored empathy that can happen. So those are just a few of the traits.
Thank you. No, that's great. I appreciate that. So first of all, just quick comment on that. I loved the part about the you complete me thing, because it reminded me, of course, it probably reminds everybody of Jerry Maguire, like the movie in 1990, whatever, or 2000, whatever, right? But that is like the fairy tale Disney, kind of thing that so many people, I would say particularly women, have been bred to believe that, we must find that partner to complete us. And without that partner,
And if it feels like a fairy tale, it is a fairy tale. So that's what we want to remember. Because that's not the way humans are. Normal human beings are not that way. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be good people out there, or we fall in love with somebody who's really nice, or I'm not limiting any of that. But if it's too good to be true, there's probably something lurking behind that. If it's too good to be true. They also, they can't acknowledge their own faults, do they acknowledge their own faults? And one of the main thing is, do they have real guilt? Do they have real guilt? People will ask me, Jerry, do you think I'm a narcissist? My mother thinks I'm a narcissist. And I'll go, well, do you ever feel guilty? And they go, all the time. I go, then probably less. You may have other problems, but that's probably not the one, because narcissists are not doing anything wrong to ever feel guilty. There is no guilt. There's no need to. I'm right and I'm wonderful, and what would I have to feel guilty about?
Right.
And so I think do they have true guilt, and looking for that.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. So here's another question from somebody. clearly still in a relationship. So this person is asking, why is it so hard to walk away from a relationship when every part of you knows it's over? That is a question I'm sure many of us have asked.
Okay. And haven't we all? And me included. And
Me
I'm
too.
going, and I remember being down on myself and really critical of myself. Jerry, you're the biggest moron in the whole country to be doing this. And I'm sure we've said harsher things to ourselves for how, I know this is all wrong, but why can't I walk away? Why can't I leave? The good news, well, the bad news is we feel stuck. The good news is the solution is not near the problem. And so the solution is not in, okay, I just need for someone to come and kidnap me and not let me keep dating that person. Okay, no, that's the solution is too near the problem. The problem oftentimes is a family of origin problem and a childhood problem that keeps us connected to the narcissist that we can't let go. We're still trying to get something from them, to change them, or we're still trying to keep up the old messages that we're bad, and they keep feeding the we're bad messages. And that feels normal and common to us. That's what we grew up with. So if you can when I try to help people break that bond, then if we go back and do childhood family of origin issues, people then tend to open up and they organically feel more free to let go of the narcissist because they're stuck back there, which gets them stuck up here. And we don't see that. We just think it's a present problem. No, it's a present and a past problem. And the solution is probably way back there. And certainly you can say the solution is, well, you need to leave. Well, I knew in my head I needed to leave. I mean, I wasn't stupid about that. I knew, yeah, I should. But why am I not? That's where it's that unconscious stuff that we're not seeing that we can't let go. But we also may have had parents that we're trying to get love from, trying to have parents that we always wanted, siblings we always wanted, and boyfriends and husbands and wives that we always wanted. And so we stay in the game until we can make it happen. No, we need to stop that game from its beginning so that we can stop it now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful to.
Yeah, I think that was really good. And it reminds me, and for everyone watching right now, whoever asked that question, I've definitely experienced that also, just like you mentioned, Jerry. And I think like one of the things that it brings up for me is certainly like childhood abandonment issues. I know that's been a big thing for me in past breakups, and to the extent of like, right, logically, I didn't even want to be with this person anymore. It wasn't, right. I mean, but it was like
all of your friends are going, he's not good for you.
Like it didn't make any sense.
You got all the evidence.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense, but I still stayed there because of, right, it's almost like I needed to be abandoned by them so that I could keep that cycle going too, as opposed to the opposite.
Absolutely. And if evidence doesn't convince you, then the connection is on an emotional level, not an evidentiary level. Your friends, the narcissism, what they're doing, if it's not convincing you, then it's a deeper trauma bond, fear of abandonment. Well, where did we learn trauma bonds and fear of abandonment? Oftentimes we learn those growing up. We can also have experience of those in adulthood too. But that's where we need to do to melt the glue that's making us stick to these folks, because all the evidence is saying you're crazy. I'm even saying I'm crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And I can't melt the glue. The glue still is sticky because the glue is a part of my inner emotional superstructure. And my theory, and a Bowenian type theory is, I'm still partaking of the family of origin super self. I don't have a self. I just take take on that super self of the family. Now I'm taking on the super self of the narcissist. Well, how do we break that? Through self and doing our own work. And then we can begin to let that go, whether it be abandonment. Can I, and I think you're right, that fear of abandonment was just so huge that, well, what would I be without them? Who would I be without them?
Right.
And it's like, but what I am with them is horrible, but who would I be without them? Well, that's a whole unconscious childhood issue kind of question. That's, and in some ways it's not about the narcissist, but he or she has gotten caught up in that conflict that we have, and that's where we can't let go. And I've seen a lot of people do positive work about letting go, going that realizing the solution is not near the problem. Right. Let's look over here rather than looking right there.
Yeah.
And that, I've always found that to be a more helpful way to work it.
See, that's going to be another thing that I always remember, a Jerryism. Solution is not near the problem.
Not near the problem. It just often isn't. And everybody just focuses on the problem.
Right.
And just like when couples argue, they think what they're arguing about is the problem.
Nope.
And if we just resolve this conflict or this argument, that won't change the problem. There'll be a new argument. There'll be a different topic. Because the problem is not near the argument. It's out here in our emotional field from family and that.
Got it.
So that.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jerry. So here's another question someone had, and I don't exactly know how they're asking it being related to narcissistic abuse, but obviously this is a topic that deals with any kind of toxic relationship. So they're asking, I would really love to know more about toxic shame, where it originates from and how to heal it.
Well, and toxic shame is many times what many of us have brought into the relationship with the narcissist, because toxic shame is a great it's a deep vulnerability that can be exploited by a narcissist if we have toxic shame, and that toxic painful shame that we have is something that is a part of that chemistry in which we'll be attracted to someone who won't be so healthy. And I know, there's some people say, well, you're just blaming the people who get into a relationship. It's their fault for getting into the relationship with a narcissist. And I go, no. Narcissists are cluster B. They're very clever. I understand all of that. But I also know all of us play a part in all of our relationships. It just, I can't get away from that. And so what parts do we play? I know we don't play the part, boy, I'd sure like to be in a narcissistic relationship today. I don't think anybody's choosing that any more than someone would choose alcoholism. I don't think anybody just goes, I think I'll start being an alcoholic today. That sounds like a good idea. But do we interact with our alcoholism? Yes, we do. And so we're not totally uninvolved in that process. The toxic shame is very damaging. I remember the toxic shame that I had carried for years and years and years, and it affected everything I did. And I did not feel I would be accepted or loved. I'm not worthy. I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. It's not that I do things wrong or do things bad. I am bad. That's the shame. The shame is I am bad. Guilt is I've done something bad. Shame is I am bad. And I think there's some good work people can do around shame, where they can find a safe place and begin to become themselves, sharing their shameful parts or at least shameful thoughts, shameful beliefs, or shameful behavior with someone who understands shame, accepts them, because that's one of the best ways to overcome shame is to be seen and heard in a safe place. Because shame says you should not be seen, and shame says you have nothing to offer or share, and that you are bad. And so if we have a place where we can do that, which friends can do that, pastors, coaches, therapists, a place where we can begin to deal with our toxic shame, that can really make a big difference and change that chemistry about how we go find a narcissist.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. So before we wrap up and also tell everyone where they can learn about you, I'd love it if you just touch on having grown up with narcissistic parents, because I know a lot of people have dealt with that and or have also had romantic relationships. But any suggestions there on how to heal those wounds from the past of literally being raised by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father, and how that affects them in their life?
And a large segment of the clients that I see individually have grown up in narcissistic homes. And I do work with adult children of narcissism. And it's a very destructive family environment. And in fact, I just was speaking with one woman today, and she grew up in with a narcissistic mother it was just horrible. And that she's healed so much now, she's going to be starting her own spiritual guidance and coaching work for herself. And she was just a shell of herself when we first started meeting, because everything inside of us, if we grew up in narcissism, everything inside of us, the messages are all wrong. They're just all wrong. Our subjectivity, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, it's just all bent and burnt and really damaged. And I believe that if you've grown up in a narcissistic home, you can heal, and that you can do that by, number one, recognizing the narcissism. That helps. And seeing how that has been a destructive force, and then also beginning to differentiate yourself from the narcissistic parent, and also then begin to get the narcissistic parent out of you. And that's the work that I help ACONs do, in getting the narcissistic parent out of them. Because just as we were parented by the narcissistic parent, now if we're an adult or 50 years old or whatever we are, we're still parenting ourselves as a narcissist. Mm-hmm. We're doing self-parenting that's narcissistic, and that's what we want to break, so that we become a good parent to ourselves rather than just the internalized parent of the narcissist. And so I work to help people get that internalized parent changed and healed, so they can begin to be a better parent to themselves, loving their inner child, becoming more aware of their inner child. Margaret Paul has a great book out on inner bonding, on the inner child. I think there's, I know I was going to mention Margaret Paul's book, and then the Margellus Fjellstead book, Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship. Fjellstead is F-J-E-L-S-T-A-D. Wonderful. She has a couple of good books on that very mature view of looking at how to heal from a narcissist damage, either as a child or as an adult from a relationship. So that's kind of my thoughts around ACONs and healing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know so many people deal with that. And yeah, I'm glad that we dove into that. So because we are running low on time, I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to learn more about you, Jerry. So could you share a little bit about that? And I know you have a free gift for everybody, and there'll be a link below this video where you can click on that to head over to Jerry's site. So what do you have?
Well, we've got a brand new website up now, which we really like. It has a lot more interactivity to it. There are some paid plan memberships on it, so you can get more benefits. You can get exclusive content and those kinds of things. All of my videos and all the exclusive content. And by the way, all of my stuff is now getting on podcasts. So you can listen to me on Spotify and all the major streaming apps. I was going to offer to anyone who had seen this program that they could go to my website and have a 7-day free trial of the bronze plan. And that's a small amount in a month, but a 7-day free trial. And if you cancel after 7 days, you don't have to pay anything. And you can see all the exclusive content for free. And without, if you decide you want to continue on and get more, you can. But this would be a free gift for those people who are watching today and who might benefit. You can contact me at jerrywise5@gmail.com or www.jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com. And I think we'll put up that. Yeah, you'll be putting up the link.
Yeah, we'll have
there.
Links to all that. Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. I always love your work and love connecting with you and everyone. If you are interested in working further with Jerry, I highly recommend him. I love our interactions. You just have such a soothing, amazing way about you, and always,
nice.
always say such awesome things. So I really appreciate you.
And can I share that we do have a new workshop that I just did recently, and it's now going to be for sale up on the website. An introduction to self-differentiation.
Excellent. Awesome.
For folks.
Cool. Good deal.
It's always a joy to be with you, Andy. You're fun to talk with, and you're such a good interviewer. I really enjoy that.
Well, thank you. I
like the work you're doing.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. Do you have any last words you want to say to everyone before we wrap up?
Well, I think it'd be nice if I could say something clever. I usually have some clever things to say. I just want to say that don't stop any recovery. Don't become discouraged. Keep continuing to work on that because there is hope and help. If you're not getting it now, find it. Keep looking because there is hope and help out there. And I think you really can grow beyond narcissistic damage and narcissistic abuse.
Got it.
And we just had World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day, June 1st. And so that's huge. And I want people to be aware of that because it's very real. Absolutely. Yeah. I appreciate you letting me come on today. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for saying yes. And thank you everyone who's watching or listening right now for showing up for yourself. It's amazing that you're here and you're willing to become aware of different things in your life and heal. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you again real soon. Take care. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this latest Dandelion Masterclass with Jerry Wise. And he talked with us about overcoming narcissistic relationships with something called self-differentiation. So I hope you really enjoyed this. One of the things I really wanted to hone in on in this wrap up was one of the questions that a member had, which is, why is it so hard to walk away from a relationship when every part of you knows it's over? I so resonate with this. I feel your pain. Whoever asked this question, I so resonate with this because it is so challenging sometimes. And like Jerry said, right, it's not necessarily, it might seem like the challenge is walking away from that current relationship, but like he mentioned, it is often due to childhood wounds, not necessarily what's going on in that current relationship, although obviously that seems like that's exactly what's going on, right? So some of those core wounds where this kind of experience might be coming from are, number one, abandonment. And Jerry and I talked a little bit about that. So were you abandoned as a child? And this could be physical abandonment, right? A parent actually physically left you, or maybe you were adopted, or perhaps you had one parent leave, or your parents were divorced. But it could also be emotional abandonment, because a lot of us were abandoned emotionally and not necessarily, our needs were not met in that way if our parents didn't know how to take care of us in that way, right? If our parents were adult
adult children, right? People who weren't actually adults raising a child, still children themselves in so many ways, then obviously there's going to be a lot of emotional abandonment for us as children. So one of the things I wanted to touch on with this also is, right, are you so terrified of being abandoned because of some kind of past abandonment issue that you are willing to stay in this relationship just so that it's not over, right? Just so that you don't have to have those childhood abandonment issues triggered, all those memories triggered, that abandonment trauma triggered in your body, right? And I so relate to this because I've had many relationships in my life prior to meeting my partner Ike, and I had many relationships in which I was abandoned, so to speak, or I was dumped. And the majority, in fact, I think broke up with 2 people ever in my life. But the vast majority of those relationships, I was the one who was left, which of course, in my experience, was fulfilling on what I know to be normal. What I knew to be normal was my dad abandoned me, right? My parents got divorced and he moved away from the family. And while I saw him every other weekend, I just always carried around this abandonment. I also had a lot of emotional abandonment with my mother. So this was one of my very core stories, was being abandoned. So every relationship I was in, even if I wasn't happy, even if I knew it wasn't right for me, like you were mentioning, the person who asked this question, I didn't leave it. I never left it because I just saw I couldn't do it. It was like this part of me just couldn't handle leaving it because that would mean it was over, and that would mean, I was alone. So I often, like I mentioned with Jerry, like I would just wait and wait and wait and wait. And eventually they would break up with me. And then I got that abandonment. Then this sounds horrible, but like my secret wish was fulfilled because that is what I expected. That's what the inner child in me is so used to experiencing, that I wanted to keep experiencing that to really try to process this. So is this something that you're going through in this current relationship that's difficult to leave? Just something to take a look at. And I know it's hard. I know it's painful. These things are not easy. I speak from personal experience. They are not easy. Another thing to touch on in, childhood issues that could be related to this relationship that's hard to walk away from is shame, right? We talked a lot about toxic shame in this conversation with Jerry. So shame is one of those things that if you don't feel like you're good enough, if you feel like you're defective, if you tell yourself there's something wrong with you, then oftentimes you will stay in a relationship that's not healthy for you because it's reflecting back what you believe about yourself. So shame and abandonment are these 2 major childhood wounds that could be keeping you in such a traumatic kind of relationship. So number one recommendation that I would have is just, first of all, be aware. Are these 2 things or one or the other? Do you deal with these things? Did you deal with them in childhood? Could these core wound issues be influencing how you're behaving in your relationship today and where you're at? So I just wanted to share a little bit about that. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this latest masterclass with Jerry. I've always loved Jerry. We've had a lot of great conversations over the years, and I'm so glad that he was able to come back and chat with us today. And thank you all so much for being part of this community, for being a dandelion together and going through this journey of overcoming toxic relationships. And we'll see you again real soon. Take care.